forest was thick with fog, a breathless labyrinth of shadows and salt-laced wind. The ocean's roar below collided with the shrill pulse of police sirens in the distance, blending into something primal, almost alive. Luna ran, her breath tearing through her lungs, her hair tangled and wet, her hands bloodied from clawing at the brambles. She could hear them, voices shouting her name, orders echoing between trees, a female voice trembling at the edge of desperation. It was Lee, calling out not as a doctor, not as a guardian of the law, but as a mother begging a child who had already stepped too far into darkness. Yet Luna kept running, every sound behind her transforming into the voice of her own guilt. The manhunt had begun hours earlier, but it already felt eternal. After the crash that nearly killed Steffi and her unborn twins, the truth about Luna's reappearance spread like wildfire. The hospital cameras had caught her near the parking lot, her figure disappearing into the night minutes before Steffi's car was hit. For weeks, law enforcement had searched with no success, until a hiker spotted her near the coast, moving through the redwood forest like a specter. Now, every cop, every news camera, every helicopter beam converged on that stretch of coastline. It wasn't just a chase, it was an exorcism. Luna stumbled over a root, catching herself on a low branch slick with rain. Her body was shaking, not just from exhaustion but from the weight of everything she'd done. She could hear Lee's voice cutting through the storm. "Luna, please. You don't have to run anymore." But she knew that was a lie. Once, Lee had promised her redemption, had looked her in the eyes and said that no one was beyond saving. But even Lee's belief had limits. The world had turned Luna into a monster, and monsters didn't get second chances. She pressed her back against a tree, trying to silence her breathing. Through the mist, she could see blue and red lights flickering, shadows of officers fanning out. Somewhere closer, another silhouette moved, taller, slower, patient. Sheila Carter. Luna had sensed her presence before she'd seen her, like a familiar poison seeping back into her veins. Sheila was not calling out, not pleading like Lee. She was watching, waiting. The two of them were bound by a shared sickness, one that the world had tried to contain and failed. Sheila had been her mentor once, the whisper in her ear telling her that love, when denied, became the truest form of power. Now Sheila was here again, lurking at the edge of the clearing, her face half-lit by the strobe of police lights, her expression unreadable. "You can't hide from them forever," she said quietly, her voice carried by the wind. "But you can choose who finds you." Luna's eyes darted toward her, wide, terrified. "Why are you here?" she rasped. Sheila smiled faintly. "To see how your story ends." Behind them, Lee's voice grew closer, breaking through the chaos. "Luna, listen to me. Whatever's happened, we can fix it. You're sick, not evil." The word sick made Luna flinch. How many times had she heard it? From doctors, from therapists, from Finn himself. But none of them understood. She hadn't been driven by madness. She'd been driven by love. Twisted, yes, but real. Finn was the only person who had ever seen her, who had made her feel something other than emptiness. And now he was building a life with Steffi, the woman who had everything Luna never could: family, forgiveness, belonging. The memory of Steffi's terrified face, as the car spun out of control, replayed in Luna's mind. She hadn't meant for it to go so far. It was supposed to be a warning, a reminder that she could still reach Finn through fear, if not through affection. But when the crash came, when she saw the flames and heard the screams, something inside her broke beyond repair. For weeks she had hidden, avoiding her own reflection, haunted by the sound of sirens and the echo of Finn's voice calling her name on the news. Now, cornered by the very people who had once sworn to help her, she realized the truth. There was nowhere left to run. The forest opened to the edge of the cliffs, a jagged maw overlooking the sea. Rain lashed at her face, stinging her eyes. Below, the waves churned, white and violent. The drop was sheer. Behind her, Lee broke through the clearing, breathless, her flashlight shaking. "Luna, don't do this," she cried, her voice cracking. Come back with me. We'll get you help. Luna turned slowly, her hair plastered to her face, her eyes wild but lucid. You said that before, she whispered. You said love could fix me. Lee took a cautious step forward. It still can. You're not your mistakes. But Luna shook her head, a bitter smile twisting her lips. Aren't I? Look what I've done. Look what you let me become. For a moment, Lee saw not a criminal but a child, the same girl she had once bandaged after a playground fall, the same voice that had once said thank you with trembling sincerity. But the girl was gone. In her place stood a ghost carved from regret. Then came another movement, Sheila emerging from the shadows. Lee, she said softly, almost mockingly, you might want to stay back. This one's beyond saving. Lee's flashlight caught Sheila's face, pale and cold. What are you doing here? Lee demanded. Helping, Sheila replied with a faint shrug. One way or another, someone has to end this. The rain intensified, thunder rolling overhead like judgment. Luna glanced between the two women, the mother who had failed to save her and the surrogate devil who had taught her how to destroy. Somewhere in the distance, police officers shouted, their flashlights cutting through the dark. Luna took a step closer to the edge. They'll never let me live, she murmured. They'll put me back in a cage. Maybe this is better. Lee shook her head violently. No. You have people who care for you. Finn. Luna's voice cracked, half laugh, half sob. He hates me. He should. I almost killed his children. She took another step back. Her heel slipped slightly on the wet ground, sending pebbles skittering down the cliff. The sound made Lee's stomach drop. She reached out her hand. Please, Luna. Take my hand. For one heartbeat, Luna hesitated. The world seemed to narrow to that single moment. The storm, the sea, the distance between two hands that could have changed everything. Then another voice broke through the thunder. Sheila's. Low, calm, venomous. She'll never forgive you, Luna. Not her, not him, not anyone. But you can still control how this ends. Luna's eyes flickered toward her. What are you saying? I'm saying, Sheila whispered, stepping closer, that if you fall, it's on your terms. You disappear, and they'll never touch you again. Maybe one day you even come back. Or maybe you finally find peace down there. Either way, it's your choice, not theirs. Lee turned on her. Don't you dare, she shouted. You've done enough damage. But Sheila only smiled, the kind of smile that made it impossible to tell whether she was taunting or telling the truth. And then, in one terrible instant, everything moved at once. A shout, a slip, a flash of movement. Luna stumbled backward. Lee lunged forward, catching her wrist for half a second before the mud gave way beneath them both. The sound of Luna's scream was swallowed by the sea. The world froze. Lee fell to her knees at the edge, clutching at the empty air, her hands covered in rain and dirt and blood. Sheila stood a few feet away, expression unreadable. The police arrived moments later, floodlights slicing through the mist. What happened? Someone shouted. Lee couldn't answer. Her voice was gone. They searched for hours, even after dawn broke. The cliffs were treacherous, the current strong. Divers found fragments, a shoe, a piece of fabric, but no body. Officially, Luna Nozawa was declared missing, presumed dead. Unofficially, questions lingered. Some said she jumped. Others whispered that the ground had given way. But a few, those who had seen Sheila lurking in the woods that night, spoke of a different possibility, that Luna hadn't fallen at all, that she'd been pushed. In the days that followed, grief took on strange shapes. Lee locked herself in her house, haunted by the memory of that last touch, the fleeting weight of Luna's hand in hers. She told the police it had been an accident, but at night, she couldn't shake the thought that she might have held on tighter, might have saved her. Then again, part of her wondered, had she let go on purpose? Had some deep, buried instinct whispered that the only way to end this nightmare was to let Luna fall? Sheila, for her part, vanished before investigators could question her. Some said she fled town. Others believed she was still out there, watching, waiting for the next act in a story that refused to die. And Finn, when he learned what had happened, felt something inside him break quietly. The daughter he'd once sworn to help had become the ghost that would haunt every surgical light, every nightmare, every quiet moment with Steffi and their children. Will and Electra, too, were shattered. Luna had reached out to them once in letters, rambling, desperate confessions of love, of pain, of wanting to be better. Now, those letters felt like epitaphs. Each one began with hope and ended with madness. Will blamed himself for ignoring them. Electra, though she hated to admit it, felt relief tangled in guilt, relief that the danger was gone, guilt that she could feel anything but sorrow. Weeks passed, and the ocean refused to give up its secret. Without a body, the line between death and disappearance blurred. Lee returned to work eventually, her colleagues whispering behind her back. Sheila's name resurfaced in gossip columns, her image caught on security cameras hundreds of miles away, but never confirmed. And Finn, he began to dream of Luna not as she had been at the end, but as she was before the darkness took her. A quiet girl with eyes too large for her face, asking him once, "Do you think people can change?" Sometimes, when he stood on the same cliffs where she fell, he thought he heard her voice in the wind. Not crying, not accusing, just whispering, as if reminding him that love and guilt are sometimes the same thing. The bold and the beautiful had always been a world of resurrection, of ghosts returning with new faces and old sins. So the question lingered, both for the audience and for the characters who couldn't move on. Was Luna truly gone? Or was she somewhere beyond the surf, rebuilding herself in silence, waiting for the perfect moment to rise again? If her body was ever found, perhaps peace would follow. But if not, if the waves had swallowed her whole, then her absence would become a wound that refused to heal. For Lee, for Will, for Finn, for Sheila, it would remain a question without answer. Did Luna fall? Did she jump? Or did someone decide that the world would be safer if she never stood up again? In that uncertainty lay the cruel beauty of their world, that no truth ever stayed buried, and no death was ever truly final. The forest kept its silence, the sea its secrets, and somewhere, under the endless roar of the waves, a single echo remained. A name, half prayer, half curse, Luna. Days turned into weeks, and still the ocean held its silence. The cliffs remained off-limits, the police tape fluttering in the coastal wind like the tattered edges of a wound that refused to close. Yet, even after the official investigation wound down, none of them, Lee, Finn, Sheila, Will, or Electra, could step away from the ghost of that night. It wasn't simply the absence of a body that haunted them, it was the absence of closure. Everyone who had been there that night carried a secret version of the truth, a private memory too heavy to share. Lee lived in fragments now. At work, she moved with mechanical precision, her reputation intact, but her spirit fractured. Her colleagues whispered that she looked older, her eyes hollowed by something unspoken. At home, she avoided mirrors. She couldn't bear to see the woman who might have let go of her own daughter. Every time she closed her eyes, she relived the moment. The weight of Luna's wrist, the slippery mud, the impossible choice between holding on and setting both of them free. Sometimes she dreamed that she hadn't let go, that she'd pulled Luna back up, that the girl had collapsed in her arms sobbing, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mama." But the dream always ended the same way, with the sea reclaiming them both. Finn tried to carry his mother's pain while hiding his own. Outwardly, he appeared calm, determined to keep Steffi and the twins safe, but there were nights when he woke in a sweat, hearing Luna's voice whispering through the dark. "You didn't save me. You just let me drown differently." He'd tell himself it was only guilt playing tricks on his mind, but the feeling grew stronger each time he returned to the hospital. The trauma bay, where Luna's name had flashed across the chart, still felt cursed. Every beep of the monitors, every flash of surgical light reminded him of her last words. Steffi saw what it was doing to him. He smiled for her, but the warmth in his eyes was gone, replaced by a quiet vigilance. He checked the locks twice at night, flinched at the sound of ocean waves. The man who had once believed in redemption now saw danger in forgiveness. He told Steffi he needed to protect the family, but she understood the truth. He was trying to protect himself from what he'd become. And then there was Sheila, alive, unpunished, and more dangerous in her silence than she had ever been in action. She hadn't vanished completely. She had simply shifted into the periphery, moving like smoke through the lives of those she'd scarred. Rumors of her surfaced across state lines. A woman matching her description volunteering at a rehab clinic in Oregon, another spotted near the docks in Monterey. But nothing stuck. Finn suspected she was alive, watching. Lee feared it. And yet, in her darkest hours, she also found herself wondering, had Sheila saved her that night by not intervening, or had she been the one who made sure Luna never stood up again? The questions became a private hell. Lee revisited the scene weeks later, walking the cliffs alone as the tide crashed below. The fog was thicker now, swallowing the horizon, but something about the air felt wrong. On a rock near the waterline, she saw something pale, a scrap of fabric, half buried in seaweed. Her heart stopped. It was a piece of Luna's coat, unmistakable. The police dismissed it as debris carried by the current, but to Lee it was a message. The sea, it seemed, was not finished speaking. Across town, Will Spencer received an anonymous email with an attachment, a single image of Luna standing in front of a weathered motel, time-stamped 2 nights earlier. The photo was grainy, but the eyes were unmistakable. He stared at it for hours, torn between disbelief and dread. Luna had been his shadow once, his obsession and his guilt. Part of him wanted to believe she was alive, that there was still a chance for atonement. But another part whispered that if she had survived, she hadn't come back for forgiveness. She'd come back to finish what she started. Will debated telling Finn but couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead, he reached out to Electra. When he showed her the photo, she recoiled, her hands trembling. "It's fake," she said immediately. "Someone's trying to mess with you." But her voice wavered, and he saw it. The fear she'd tried to bury. She, too, had heard things, a voicemail late at night, just breathing on the other end, a lily left on her car windshield, a child's music box playing a tune that only Luna used to hum. The haunting wasn't physical, it was psychological. Luna had become an idea, a curse that slipped into their lives in whispers and reflections. If she was alive, she was toying with them. If she was dead, she had taken root in their guilt, blooming from it like a flower from rot. One night, Finn returned home late from the hospital to find a small envelope on the doorstep. No address, no stamp. Inside was a seashell, cracked, glistening, and faintly smelling of salt. Beneath it was a note written in a hand he recognized instantly. "The ocean keeps its secrets for those who know how to listen." He didn't tell Steffi. He couldn't. But the next morning, he drove back to the cliffs alone. The tide was low, the air eerily still. Standing there, he felt the pull of the sea, as though it were calling him closer. For a moment, he thought he saw movement below, a figure, small, pale, slipping between the rocks. But when he blinked, it was gone. Only the waves remained. Back in town, Lee received a call from the coroner's office. They had found something new, human remains washed up several miles down the coast. Female, approximate age 30, DNA testing pending. Lee's breath caught. The rational part of her wanted closure, proof that Luna was truly gone. But another part, the mother buried beneath layers of guilt and grief, prayed that it wasn't her. Because if the body wasn't Luna's, then maybe, just maybe, there was still a chance to rewrite the ending. Days later, the test results came in. The remains didn't match Luna's DNA. Relief rippled through Lee's chest, but it was fleeting, replaced almost immediately by dread. If the body wasn't hers, then the mystery deepened. Someone else was dead and Luna was still out there, or her ghost was ensuring they believed so. That evening, Steffi tucked the twins into bed while Finn stood by the window, staring out into the rain. When she asked what was wrong, he only said, "I think this isn't over." She told him he was just tired, that the past would fade, that they could finally live in peace. But even as she spoke, the lights flickered. A power surge. The baby monitor crackled, and through it came a faint sound, distorted but unmistakable. The same lullaby Luna had sung as a child, the same melody Lee had once hummed to soothe her to sleep. Steffi froze. Finn turned pale. The signal went dead. The next morning, Lee received a text from an unknown number. It was a video. Shaky, low quality, but the image was clear enough. A woman's hand, pale and trembling, tracing letters in the sand. Luna. Then the camera panned upward, showing a stretch of the same cliffs where she'd fallen. The recording ended with a single whisper. "You let me fall." By the time Lee reached the cliffs again, the tide had already washed the message away. But as she stood there, the wind carrying the smell of rain and salt, she could feel it, the same cold dread from that night. The sea, vast and indifferent, stretched out before her, hiding its truth beneath the waves. Somewhere behind her, a shadow moved among the trees. And though no one spoke of it aloud, everyone felt the shift, the sense that Luna Nozawa's story wasn't finished. Whether ghost, survivor, or myth, she had become